Hey, Ty Cohen here, and I want to talk to you about assets and liabilities really quickly. And what I mean by assets and liabilities is not of a financial type or not of a material type. Rather, I'm talking about assets and liabilities in terms of how do you see yourself? How do you see the things that you might perceive right now to be shortcomings, right? You might see them as liabilities. You might see them as something that holds you back, right? I was recently reading an article about Cindy Crawford, right? And you might be familiar with Cindy Crawford, model. I think she's an actress as well. But when she was first coming up in the modeling scene, you know, one of her so-called liabilities to a lot of people in the modeling industry was the fact that she has a mole on her face here. And it's right around this area here, right? And they wanted her to cover it up. They wanted her to get rid of it. They discussed ways that she can go in and have it surgically removed. And she said, you know what? If I do that, then I'm just gonna look like all of the other pretty women that's out there. It's not gonna be something that sets me apart. It's not gonna be something that gives me this unique look. She understood that having the mole on her face, right, was not a liability, but rather an asset. And because she stood her ground, because she switched that around, she turned it around to her benefit, she went on to become one of the world's most successful models, right? So sometimes we have we've got these shortcomings. We have these things about ourselves that we just don't like, and we don't realize that if we only play to those, right? We play to our shortcomings and we twist them to a point where they become our strengths, then we could probably get to where we want to be a lot faster. We could probably help a lot more people. We could probably reach a lot more people. I'll give you a couple of examples of how, as I was younger, when I was younger coming up, I saw two things that I perceived to be, you know, liabilities. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that they were actually assets. The first thing was, you know, when I was in my 20s, I actually tried to start a record label. We not tried, because we did have a pretty cool record label. We sold a lot of records. We did really well. We got on a lot of radio stations in the tri-state, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. And we had I had a lot of artists, different artists, right? And I wanted to be a rapper as well. I was one of the rappers on the label, but because I have this distinctive voice, and at the time, I didn't realize how much of an asset it was. I looked at it as a liability. But because I have this distinctive voice, I've got a little bit of a list. I might pronounce words a little bit differently. I grew up in a primarily Spanish neighborhood where we were one of three only African-American families in my neighborhood when I was growing up. So I've developed this little twang, this dialect, right? And as I would rap and sing on songs, it came out. And I saw that as a liability. Little did I know that it was an asset, because a lot of people, when they heard me rapping, they really loved it. They loved the fact that I stood out, that I had this distinctive voice. Even now, to this day, when I'm speaking on stages, when I'm making videos, when I'm being interviewed on a podcast or on a radio station, you know, the voice that I have is something that stands out and people are able to identify me with. All right, so I've now taken that and I've used it to my advantage. What are some of the things that you right now perceive to be liabilities, but that are actually assets that you can use to your benefit, right? I'll give you another thing. So I was born with sickle cell anemia. A lot of you may be aware of that. If you know my story, right? I was born with something that is called sickle cell anemia, and sickle cell anemia disease. So there's sickle cell anemia trait, and then there's sickle cell anemia disease. Sickle cell disease is something that was deemed a chronic disease. It's something that, you know, would kill a lot of people who had it at a very young age, in their 20s, in their teens, in their 30s. It was something that caused a lot of people who, and still to this day, who have sickle cell anemia, to live very limited lives, meaning you can't be exposed to a lot of stress. You can't be exposed to extreme levels of coldness. You can't be exposed to extreme levels of warmth, right? You have to make sure that you're hydrated. You have to stay away from caffeine. And any of those things could cause you to go into a sickle cell anemia crisis. Now, growing up, well until I was like in my 20s, I was totally embarrassed by the fact that I had sickle cell anemia. I felt like I always had to prove myself. right? Little did I know that having sickle cell was not a liability, but more of an asset. Because I felt like I had to prove myself, I always worked harder at any job that I did than the people that I looked around at and that had good health in my eyes. It seemed like they had good health. I never let sickle cell anemia be a reason why I couldn't do something, or why I couldn't be successful at something, or why I couldn't beat someone at whatever it was, right? Operating a business, being a husband, buying a house, starting multiple businesses, flying around the planet, making millions of dollars. I never let sickle cell anemia be a crutch as to why I couldn't do those things, right? Instead, again, I used it as my advantage, because I said, I want to be able to beat the hell out of whoever's in my immediate area who may have good health, right? Who may have to, I have to get 8 hours of sleep in order to be at a peak state. There's a lot of people who could do without that, right? And most good days I could do with 6, 7. But there's some people that could break night, right? And if you're from the hood, you know what the term break night means. There's some people that could go for days without sleep. There's some people, when they're working on their businesses, they could sleep on 3 or 4 hours a night. Because I have sickle cell anemia, I have to make sure that I'm well rested. So it was always like a challenge to me. I always said, I want to make it my goal to be able to beat anyone that's in my circumference who has great health, who can get by on a little bit of sleep, right? At anything that you pit me against. So I use sickle cell anemia as this tool that helped me to get to this point that, as I was coming up, unfortunately, a lot of other people were not able to get to, because they looked at other things as a crutch, as a liability, right? It could be being black. It could be growing up in the hood as we did, right? It could be not having the right resources. It could be not having the right finances, right? So many people let those things be a freaking crutch to them that they kind of hold themselves back, like they create this barrier for themselves. And instead they could say, okay, I don't have the finances, so because I don't have the finances, let me see how creative I can get, right? Because I'm black, or I'm African American, or I'm Spanish, or I'm Chinese, or I'm from Thailand, or whatever it may be. Let me see what else I can do. Let me use that to my advantage, right? Because I grew up in the hood, I look at the fact that because I grew up in the hood, it now gives me the ability to deal with all types of people. So now I can be in a room where there's people that have made billions of dollars, and then I'm also in a room where there's people that have grown up in dire circumstances, that have grown up on food stamps, or welfare as my family did, or Social Security, and people that have been on check systems, and I'm now able to navigate between all of those audiences, right? And I think that gives me the advantage. So look at what it is that you have right now that you're looking at as a crutch. Are you female? Are you a minority? Is it the neighborhood that you grew up in? Is it the fact that there's no one in your family that supports you, that understands you? Your husband, your wife may not understand you. They may not support your dreams. And then turn that on his head and say, how can I use this perceived asset in my eyes, right? I'm sorry, how can I use this perceived liability as a asset? And then watch how things change, right? Watch how things change. Our world and our view of things start to change drastically once we change the perception of what's going on around us. And once we change, how we look at it and how we believe things are to be. So I hope that finds you well. I hope this helps you out. Remember, your so-called liabilities right now, right? The hell? I had some coffee earlier, right? Supposed to stay away from caffeine, have some decaf. Your so-called liabilities are truly an asset. And once you recognize that, you'll start to look at things totally different. Turn it into a game and say, hey, you know what? I can do this because I'm black, because I didn't grow up with the funding, because no one in my family talked about how to operate a business, or, because I have this health ailment. I can do this. Right now, because I have sickle cell anemia, and because I have an amazing family, I have a wife, I have 4 children, we travel the globe. There's so many people with sickle cell anemia that are afraid to get on an airplane because of the oxygen levels that change, right? So now I can go to hospitals and I can go to support groups, And I'm actually on the board at our local hospital here, and I can talk to patients that have sickle cell anemia, and I can say, listen, yes, I've been where you have been. I've been hospitalized probably hundreds of times in my life. I had to have 2 hip replacements, right? One in my late 20s and then one in my 30s. I had to learn how to walk again twice. I had to learn how to use this left arm again all over again. I had to go through therapy when I was in my late teens to learn how to use this arm again, all right? And now it works like a charm. So now I can go in and talk from my experiences to people that have sickle cell anemia and says, listen, what someone else's perception of you does not have to become your reality. All because I've been able to take that one liability and turn it into an asset. So think about, how can you do that? What's stopping you right now? And then I want you to take a sheet of paper, and then I want you to write down whatever right now liability you think it is, right? Whatever it is that you think has held you back. Whether you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the resources, you don't have the networks, the connections, right? Write it down on a piece of paper, and then I want you to write 10 reasons why that is not true and why you should be able to do what it is that you can do. So in my case, right, just off the top of my head, me saying that I'm African American, right? The fact that I'm black. I say a lot of minorities kind of get into this point where we let ourselves be held down. I could say, hey, that's not true, because there's other people that have done it. There's Oprah Winfrey that have done it, right? There's Bob Johnson that have done it, right? There's Jay-Z, there's Tyler Perry. There's people across multiple fields and industries that have done it. Beyonce, right? So that could be one. I could also say, well, there's other people that are not famous that I know that are successful, that are doing it. I could look on Facebook. I could look on YouTube. I could go to events. I could go to seminars. I can go to conferences. I could go to real estate investing events, and I could see other people that may not be in public eye that are also minorities that are just kicking ass right now and doing it. And they didn't let that be an excuse. I could say, well, I could look back at my own neighborhood and look at other people that came from that had to dodge bullets like I had to back in the day, right? That have family members that got locked up, that are on drugs, that, you know, that was on welfare and went through the whole poverty mindset, and say, you know what? There's people that pulled themselves out of that. So I don't have an excuse. Because if there's anyone that looks like you that has done it, you definitely can do it as well. So I want you to take that sheet of paper, write down 10 reasons, at least 5, all right? Don't let yourself go without writing at least 5 reasons as to why you can turn that liability into an asset. All right, sickle cell anemia, I'll give you another few, right? I could say, hey, my doctor told me when I was 12 years old, I remember being in Yale New Haven Hospital in Connecticut. I remember being in Yale New Haven Hospital. I had been in a sickle cell anemia crisis for about 2 weeks. And I outside my hospital room door, I'm getting an IV and I'm getting, you know, like morphine or whatever it was at the time, to help me with the pain. And outside my hospital bedroom door, I could hear my mother and my doctor talking, right? And the doctor said in like a really matter-of-fact way, he said, Mrs. Cohen, you shouldn't expect your son Ty to live past the age of 17. This thing is going to kill him. He's going to die from sickle cell anemia or the complications of it. And then after I got out of the hospital, about a year later, my sister Gwen, who, you know, out of all of my siblings, me and her were the only ones that have sickle cell anemia. My sister Gwen passed from it, and she was in her 20s. So for a short period of time, that became my reality. So now I can look back and, you know, as I approached 17, you know, I started to think, man, well, what if that doctor was right? What if this is it for me? And then as I hit 18, you know, I read something by Les Brown. And Les Brown says, listen, if you can look up, you can get up. And then I read another passage by Les Brown. And he says, someone else's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. And I'm starting to feel better about myself. And I said, there's no way that I'm going to let this thing beat me. So I started to deal with ways of coping with it. I started to research ways of mentally overcoming it. I started to research ways of, you know, taking natural supplements that can help me, right? I started to research ways of foods that I should, and most importantly, should not eat. I started to take better care of my body, working out, making sure that I'm in elements that are not stressful. right? So all of these different things I wrote down. I could write down on my sheet, right? Hey, doctor said I would die at 17. Here I am, right? Still here. I have not had as many sickle cell anemia crises. There was a point where I would go in a hospital when I was younger at least 2 to 3 times a month with a sickle cell anemia crisis. It's been years now since I've had one, since I've learned how to deal with it. All right? So I could also say, hey, I've taught other people who have sickle cell anemia how to deal with it. So these are all of the reasons why I could write down on this list why having sickle cell anemia is actually an asset to me versus a liability. Now I'm grateful for having sickle cell anemia. But if you would have caught me when I was in my teens or my early 20s, I would have, there was plenty of times when I was laying on a hospital bed and I asked God, like, why me? Like, out of all of the freaking billions of people on the planet Earth, why do I have to have this and deal with this pain and all of the other BS that came along with it? And now I look back and I think, who better than me? Who better than me to have it so that I can help other people who have it, and also help people who don't have it. Help people who have their health, but they're still making excuses. So I hope that helps you. Look at the liabilities that you have right now and how can you turn them into an asset. Hopefully this has helped you. There's probably someone that needs to see this video. So I want you to go in and share it. I want you to like it. I want you to comment on it. And if you want me to talk about more, topics like this, like some of the obstacles and things that I had to overcome in order to get to the point where, I am now, where I've got a great family, I love my life, have an amazing supportive wife, have some great kids, some challenging kids as well, right? Like we all do, where I've been able to make just an insane amount of money. And if you were to ask me that, when I was growing up in the hood, I would have thought, no way in hell would I be able to do this, right? How I'm able to juggle multiple employees and multiple businesses, travel the planet. If you want to learn more about how I've been able to overcome the struggles and get to some of these points, let me know if you want to see more videos like this. All right, I'll see you on the next one. Go ahead, comment, like, and share. Peace out. Do it big, and then do it bigger.